So Donald Trump had a lot to say at his Madison Square Garden rally yesterday. He repeated, as part of it, he repeated some previously debunked false claims about immigration, among others. CNN's Daniel Dale has a fact check for us this morning. And Daniel, one place that we know that you are focusing on this morning is what the former president said about Harris and her role in managing the migrant crisis. Let's play this.
Almost 4 years, she never called, not once, the Border Patrol. And she was the border czar. She was in charge of the border. Think of it. 4 years she never called. Now she's trying to say, well, I was really not the border. Whether she was the border czar or not, she was put in charge of the border by Sleepy Joe.
Daniel, what are the facts here?
We've heard this a lot from Trump. You hear it in a lot of Trump ads. It is not true that Vice President Harris was ever the border czar or that she was ever in charge of the border. What Biden actually put her in charge of was a diplomatic effort related to addressing the so-called root causes of migration from three particular Central American countries, Guatemala, Honduras, and El Salvador. Now, that is you could say, border-related assignment. It is not being in charge of the border. Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas has been the official in charge of the border. Now, it is true some media outlets, when Biden gave Harris this assignment in early 2021, incorrectly described her as having been assigned the job of border czar. But CNN and others have consistently reported she rejected that title. She made clear, and her office made clear, that the assignment was more limited. And that's been the case for almost 4 years now.
I also want to play what Donald Trump said at the rally about inflation. Listen.
You know, we had the best economy, but we had no inflation. Kamala Harris has shattered our middle class. She cast the deciding votes that launched the worst inflation in the history of our country.
How people feel about inflation and affordability is a huge part of this election and how people are voting. What are the facts on this?
This is a classic Trump case where he could just tell the truth and it would be good for him politically, but instead he offers these wild exaggerations. So it is not true that there was no inflation during the Trump presidency. In fact, cumulative total price increases were just shy of 8%, 7.8% over Trump's 4 years, and that includes an abnormally low inflation period when the economy was abnormally slow during the COVID-19 pandemic in 2020. It's also not true that we've had the worst inflation the U.S. has ever had under President Biden and Vice President Harris. Trump could correctly say there was about a 40-year high in June 2022 when the rate increased to 9.1%. But first of all, it's since come way down. It's now 2.4%. Second of all, 9.1 is not even close to the all-time record. We had 23.7% in 1920. Even if you don't want to go that far back, it reached almost 15% in the early 1980s. And so we do not have now and have not had under Biden and Harris record all-time U.S. inflation.
Daniel Dale, thanks for checking the facts. John?
All right, so this morning the New York Times is reporting new concerns among Democrats that the Harris campaign is making a mistake in the final days of the election. They write that Future Forward, the leading super PAC supporting Vice President Harris, is raising concerns that focusing too narrowly on Donald Trump's character and warnings that he is a fascist is a mistake in the closing stretch of the campaign. They go on to say, quote, focusing on Trump's disturbing, ludicrous, and outlandish behavior can be an effective lead-in to talking about substantive policy, but not effective at moving vote choice on its own. With us now, Ian Sams, the senior national spokesperson for the Harris-Walz campaign. Ian, nice to see you. This is some Future Forward. They want you to win, but they have concerns. What do you say about that?
Well, thanks for having me. And I think the vice president spoke to this weekend. You know, the American people are capable of processing numerous things at once. And there are a lot of people who have a lot of different concerns about the country and the future. You think about, there are a lot of former Republicans and conservatives out there who are joining our campaign and coming out to support Vice President Harris because they're alarmed by the fact that former President Trump's own top aides, the people who know him best, have warned that he would pose a great risk to the country if he returns to power. I think it's important to keep emphasizing that, but at the same time, what does that say about Donald Trump? What does that say about him? It says about him that he's so focused on himself, his own pursuit of unchecked power, that he doesn't have time to think about you or your issues, you or your problems, how to bring your costs down. Today, for example, the vice president's going to be in Michigan. You know what she's going to be doing in Michigan? She's going to Saginaw, where she's going to be at a facility that's benefiting from the CHIPS Act that she helped pass and benefiting from the Inflation Reduction Act that she cast the tie-breaking vote to pass. Hundreds of millions of dollars are going into that facility to create over 1,000 jobs in high-tech manufacturing. She's going to be talking about that's part of her vision for the future, is to continue having investments like that happen. And on Joe Rogan on Friday, Donald Trump trashed the CHIPS bill, the same investments that are creating those 1,300 jobs in Saginaw, Michigan. This is the same group of people, Vance and Trump, who are saying that they may repeal the Inflation Reduction Act, which is, again, making these millions of dollars of investments in Michigan, in Wisconsin, for the kinds of manufacturing jobs that people need to have a good life for themselves. So when it comes to the economy, we're also laser focused on talking about the stakes of the election for voters out there who care about the economy.
The speech tomorrow on the ellipse in Washington, D.C. D.C., not a swing state, not even a state, as I've been reminded constantly this morning. How much of the focus, give me a split, like a percentage split. How much of the focus of the speech on Donald Trump, threat to democracy? How much of the speech on Vice President Harris and her proposals?
Well, I think what folks are going to hear from the vice president is a broad speech about her vision for the country. I do think you're hitting the nail on the head. She's going to be on the ellipse, which I think, as everybody knows, is the most infamous site of Donald Trump's attempt to cling to power and seek the unchecked power that he wants in a second term, free from the sort of guardrails that you had from people like John Kelly or Mark Milley or Mark Esper or his national security advisors, all of whom have come out to say this is someone who should not return to power. It's an emblem of what his focus is. His focus is on himself. His focus is on his own problems, not your problems. And I think that tomorrow the vice president is going to speak about how she actually has a different view of America, that we can turn the page on that, turn the page on the last decade of Donald Trump creating chaos, division, tearing us apart so that he can promote himself and his own political power and move to something forward. Something where we have a president who's actually focused on the issues that matter to the American people. He's going to sit in that Oval Office stewing over his enemies list, and she's going to sit in that Oval Office focused on checking off things on her to-do list to help the American people. That's going to be a fundamental choice in the election next week, and it's going to be the fundamental choice that she's going to be talking about tomorrow.
What else are we going to see from Bad Bunny over the next 8 days?
Well, I think that you capture something, the conversation about their rally yesterday. Trump is the same old tired playbook, divide and demean. That's all he's capable of doing. These speakers who were his warm-up act at this kind of bizarre rally in New York last night, they're offending people who want the leadership of this country to look out for them. And it actually is a stark reminder of Donald Trump. It's, 4 years ago when he was president, the worst hurricane hit Puerto Rico, and he delayed getting them the aid that they needed, and he just went down there and threw paper towels at them. And the vice president did something very different. She was in the Senate. She went to Puerto Rico with a bipartisan group of senators to make sure they were getting the federal aid that they need. And so, again, it shows this difference between the way that these two people approach politics, approach governing, and approach the job. And, all they did yesterday was offend and demean these people. But again, it's part of Donald Trump's playbook. He wants to do that because he doesn't have real solutions for people's lives. He just wants to divide us so that he could try to get power. And I think that the fundamental choice is, are we going to keep going back to that? Or are we going to move past all that and actually have a new way forward for the country?
Again, I just was asking about Bad Bunny. This was the first time we heard from Bad Bunny, hugely influential all around the world, but certainly within the Puerto Rican community. Will we hear from Bad Bunny again over the next 8 days?
Well, I don't speak for Bad Bunny. We're obviously excited to have his support. He inspires a lot of people out there, a lot of people across the country who take inspiration from his music. Obviously, he has a huge following, 45 million Instagram followers. I looked yesterday where he shared the vice president's plan for Puerto Rico. Those kind of voices coming out talking about what's at stake in the election. Jennifer Lopez, Ricky Martin, other Puerto Rican Americans who are saying, what we saw yesterday is just another example of trashing our community to promote himself. And so I think that the more voices come out, the bigger the tent. We have Bad Bunny and we have Liz Cheney. There's a pretty big coalition that's supporting Vice President Harris in this election. And I think that over the next week, you're going to see tens of thousands of people coming out excited about the election. You're going to see us try to harness that energy just this weekend, I should say. We knocked on 1.5 million doors in the battleground states. We are out there mobilizing to turn out the vote, to have this energy and enthusiasm you're seeing, captured to win the election next Tuesday.
Bad Bunny and Liz Cheney, that would be an interesting duet. Top 20 on at least some chart. Ian Sams, thanks so much for being with us. Appreciate it.